From terrorism to the borderless society, we explore the challenges facing the rule of law in an uncertain world. And a report from Delhi, where the Commonwealth's most senior legal identities share their views on lawyers, the law and the future. Hello, I'm Natasha Kaplinsky and welcome to Practice Makes Perfect. In this programme, we're going to be discussing the rule of law in the global community and the opportunities and challenges faced by lawyers throughout the Commonwealth's 52 countries. Now, the law is credited as being one of the UK's greatest exports, but an export whose strong foundations are sometimes undermined in a world where cybercrime, terrorism and political unrest are dominating the headlines. Well, to discuss what the future has in store for Commonwealth lawyers, I'm joined in the studio by the chair of the International Committee of the Bar Council of England and Wales, Amanda Pinto QC, barrister, academic and editor of the Commonwealth Lawyer, Dr Venkat Iyer, and human rights specialist and Commonwealth Lawyers Association past president, Mark Stevens, CBE. Amanda, let's start with you. Just to get us started, what do you see as the key challenge, really, facing Commonwealth lawyers today?
Well, I think there are two or three things in the modern world which have changed legal practice. One, huge amount of legislation, much more than in the past, and so lawyers need to keep on top of that. Secondly, the internet and access to information is a great positive, but it's also has a downside to it, I think. It's a challenge. And thirdly, the role of unregulated legal providers is also an issue for lawyers today all over the world.
So you would say that the challenges are far greater and probably a lot more complex than they have been historically?
I would, absolutely. And I think, interestingly, I think modern times have made it difficult in a way that has opened up the market and opened up what we're able to do, but also made it more complicated.
Mark, you've been involved in litigation across many Commonwealth countries. Would you agree with what Amanda's just said?
Yeah, I think there's a slight difference though. And what I would say is that the challenge today is that crime and all the other issues that law confronts are transnational. And so you have to adapt. You've got to have those transnational abilities. So when I go to a country, very often I'm confronted with adapting their local law to the way in which the UK's law has developed and evolved. And so we write briefs on the basis of their national law and how it might evolve. But we also have to factor in the issues around how the world has changed, how we have effectively become a small global community. And in those circumstances, that's an additional challenge for us as lawyers.
Venkat, I mean, you've lectured and advised in a number of Commonwealth countries. Your view would be very interesting here too.
The Commonwealth, as you know, is a diverse group of countries. In a small number of countries, the life of a lawyer would not be particularly arduous. But I would say in a majority of countries, the pressures are increasing. It depends on what type of lawyer you are. So, for example, if you're a commercial lawyer, in other words, if your practice is largely or exclusively commercial, then the pressures are not quite as many as if you were involved in political or human rights related cases. So it varies.
So possibly what you're identifying there is that the job of a Commonwealth lawyer is much more dangerous than it used to be in certain aspects of the law.
Indeed, particularly the more contentious parts of legal practice. And the dangers, of course, would be also more acute in certain parts of the country, certain jurisdictions, than in others.
What we've seen as an emerging trend is in some of the more challenging Commonwealth jurisdictions, we've seen not only opposition candidates come under the gun from the effective rulers, but also those lawyers that are brave enough to step up and defend them. So effectively, lawyers who are, by their very nature, independent, paid advocates to put forward the best arguments for a defendant in a case are very often, when they're defending human rights defenders or politicians of an alternative hue, they're also coming under attack. And we're having to send observers to see their trials where they are actually being criminalised for doing their job.
Adding to that, it's an identification of the lawyer with the cause or the client, and it's that is the real problem. I also think that there's an issue where people are representing a view that's against the government of whichever country, wherever it is. Obviously, it makes a big difference if you're two private people having a legal dispute. If one of them's the government, then the stakes are potentially higher, and unfortunately that's even translated to the judiciary.
Yes, we've seen increasingly attacks by governments on the judiciary, on the independence of the judiciary, where they've been dubbed the enemy of the people because they have made decisions which, although undoubtedly right as a matter of law, are contrary to the interests, the vested interests of the government of the day. And I think that's unfortunate because it undermines everybody's faith and confidence in the rule of law and the independence of the judges.
Venkat, it's a very serious issue. We need to find some kind of solution to it. What do you think can be done to protect people who frankly are just upholding the rule of law but putting themselves in danger at the same time?
I think much of the solution must come from within the country because there are difficulties with outside intervention. That is not to say that organizations like the Commonwealth Lawyers Association do not have a role to play. They certainly do. And there are occasions when I think outside intervention has made a difference. And to that extent, my view would be that the strategy that one needs to adopt would be a mixed one.
Our bar association very often joins up with other bar associations, whether in the British Isles or more generally, to support lawyers and judiciary in maintaining the rule of law. And we have heard anecdotally that that's extremely helpful to the legal profession or indeed the judiciary in making sure, first of all, that there is widespread knowledge of this issue, and secondly, in feeling that they're not alone, they're not isolated. And so although I agree it needs to be done within the country and everybody's government needs to wake up to what's necessary to maintain the rule of law, I think there is a role for Commonwealth Lawyers Associations and other law associations to support our colleagues.
Amanda, I imagine with the cases that you cover, this borderless society, this borderless world that we're living in now, probably has quite a big impact on your cases.
Enormous. I can't remember the last time I did a case that was domestic with no international side to it at all, and particularly in terms of things like money laundering and corruption. They're all international, or certainly the ones I do. And the reason for that is that money can move so quickly, people can communicate so easily across borders, and it makes making laws and enforcing them very, very much more complicated. And it makes cooperation all the much more needed.
And it's cooperation through the legal processes. So if something wrong or some evidence is to be found in another country, then the old-fashioned letters of request or the forms of international cooperation, which might have worked back in the Victorian era and are still in place today, really do need souping up and revving so that we can get these things backwards and forwards much more quickly. And for example, some documents have to be hand carried from one foreign office in one country to another when you could send it by email, and that is just faintly ridiculous. And it's those kinds of sillinesses that we as lawyers are hoping to be able to improve the efficiency of law enforcement.
So we've identified, Venkat, some of the challenges facing your world at the moment. But with all of that in mind, would you still encourage people to pursue a career in
I
law?
certainly would, because it is not only beneficial to society, if you want to take the sort of more noble objective, but also very fulfilling and very enriching at both personal and institutional levels.
And Amanda and Mark, your opinions, why should young people consider a future in the legal world?
I think it's a huge privilege to be involved in enabling ordinary people to get their rights and to make sure that life is lived in the best way possible. And I often think that that's forgotten when money goes to health and education. Without a proper legal system behind it, you wouldn't have everybody having a fair crack at education or health or housing. I think it's a hugely interesting and fulfilling job, and I can't think of a better job myself.
I totally agree. I cannot think of another job where you can make real change, real lasting change to a person's life. And that's what lawyers do day in, day out. And I think that anyone out there who's thinking that they should join a law course somewhere, go ahead. You will have a much enriched life as a consequence.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your time and your very interesting views. There's clearly an awful lot of challenge for Commonwealth lawyers, but it seems plenty of support as well. And we are now going to our India correspondent, Sanjay Jha, who's going to pick up the discussion from Delhi.
Thanks, Natasha. I'm reporting from Supreme Court of India in New Delhi, where some of the best lawyers talk about the rule of law and challenges that they face in the modern world.
There has been a big evolution from monarchy, from dictatorship to the rule of law. Over a period of time, rule of law is now governing the governance of most of the countries. And rule of governance means that everybody is below rule and nobody is above the rule. Now, having said that, in practicality, there are a number of difficulties, because to reach the weakest link and to wipe their tear off is a very tough job.
No one can accept accountability because of his high position. And that is the most important contribution to the rule of law.
These are huge challenges which have been brought in by the technology, by the modern technology and the mass media. There is all the constitutional values all across. They forget that there is a presumption of innocence of every person who is accused of crime. They forget that there is a right of silence. They forget that the burden is on the state. Everywhere, all over the Commonwealth jurisdiction, we notice that people don't believe in these constitutional principles, particularly the media. And they want to decide cases like instant coffee. They sometimes look more like kangaroo courts.
When the national barriers are being diluted, you come across that throughout the whole of the world, most of the places are facing terror threats or a criminal jurisprudence. Now, because of digitalization and the network becoming so strong, you don't know the crimes. There are cyber crimes originating at one place and anywhere in the world to come across, and the victim could be of somewhere else. So system has to be evolved.
We have to work out new laws with regard to jurisdiction. How are we going to decide jurisdiction? So cause of action has arisen in various countries just by a transaction which has taken less than a second. And for that purpose, nations have to come together. UNCITRAL has prepared a groundwork of rules for jurisdiction, new rules for the jurisdiction in this area, in this age. And therefore, I think all nations need to sit together, cooperate, because without that, we will be sitting ducks for all kinds of cyber crimes.
Lawyers, as part of various Commonwealth countries in their respective jurisdictions, are also threatened, and at times they lose their life in the process of pursuing their client's case before various courts of law.
Some lawyers may be criticized, attacked for appearing for persons who represent causes which the majority doesn't approve of. But I said that's not the function of the lawyer. He must defend the person whose rights are infringed to the best of his ability, irrespective of threats, irrespective of adverse criticism as far as he is concerned. I think a lawyer is not worth his salt if he yields to such threats.
I think that rule of law comes under a huge strain in times of terror. I was myself a prosecutor who prosecuted a number of terrorists in Punjab. And we noticed at that time that there was virtually no protection for the witnesses. Mere lip sympathy is not enough. Merely saying that we will not write your name in the record is not enough. We have to have sufficiently effective witness protection programs for being able to keep the justice system relevant in times of terror.
Issues like terrorism, where justice system itself can get compromised because of the threat perception, or a schematic attack on the judiciary, or on the champions like lawyers, can really compromise the rule of law. Therefore, need is there to strengthen the institutions, strengthen the bar, strengthen the judiciary, and also to be constantly vigilant that no compromise is done at anything, because it starts with a small erosion and then it suddenly goes as a dam burst. That should not happen.
But they were silent from both sides.
I think a paramount obligation of every lawyer to see that the rule of law is enforced, especially in developing countries, where there may be so many violations of human rights of the people, who are unable to approach the court themselves. And very often lawyers do perform a good service by acting as amicus curiae. They're appointed amicus curiae by the courts, and they assist the court in coming to the right conclusion when it comes to the fundamental rights of the poor, the forgotten.
CLA can take the leadership because there are a large number of countries which have common law, and therefore the problems are common and solutions can also become common.
So it is very important that a body like this, which has high international standing, where reputed people, judges, lawyers speak, then we can take advantage of their experience, of their ideas, and strengthen the rule of law in Commonwealth countries.
And we have to be vigilant about it, looking at the terrorist attacks, looking at the lawyers who have been attacked, looking at the judges who have been put behind bars.
The rule of law is the binding thread of all jurisdictions, and which is the greatest gift to the legal world, and which must prevail.
And that concludes our programme, Practice Makes Perfect, where we've looked at the challenges but also the inspirational stories of Commonwealth lawyers upholding the rule of law. And the programme is available on the Commonwealth Lawyers Association website. Until I see you again, from the team here and from me, goodbye.